to go over to London for the long summer holiday. So from Amsterdam, I applied for this competition, which was also in England, in Norwich. And it's not on anymore, but it used to be a really good platform for emerging artists. It was called East. It was an international exhibition of about 35 artists. Everybody, it was in the art school during the summer holidays. So all the students had gone, and all the studios were used to stage this exhibition. So this was my space. My space was the life drawing room. So I quite liked the fact that I got the life drawing room to make these kind of figures that were kind of alluding to the death of African people historically. And this is called wall hanging. Again, it's huge. It's a remake of the hangman that I showed you a minute ago, but it's in a different space. What happens often, and you'll see this later, what happens often with my work is that I might make the same work 2 or 3 times, but because it's in a different space, the space affects it. The architecture of the new space has changed it ever so slightly, or it might change it a lot. This, I felt, was a big difference, because the first one was just one big flat white wall. This was across 2 walls. This is a really old building. It's a Victorian building with lots of radiators and architectural features along the top of the space, which are all things that I had to negotiate to get around the space somehow with my paper. Like if you see some of the upright pieces of the gallows, some of them are actually pipes on the wall that I put my paper over and just made it kind of fit and made it look right. So this piece is called Wheel of Fortune. Does anybody recognise the image? Yes. You recognise the slave ship graphic image that we see now. We know it. But I didn't see this image growing up in England. I first saw this image when I was about 14 in Nigeria. I saw it in a history book in Nigeria where I was studying for 2 years. And at the time, it really it shocked me because I'd never seen it before. I'd learned history in England, but, history, like I was saying before, I think everything is relative, and nothing is neutral. I had obviously learned English, I learned history from a British perspective before the age of 14. And then for a couple of years, I learned history from a West African perspective. But strangely enough, my exams were all from Oxford. So this is what I mean about this whole cut and paste thing. It's all to do with this kind of post-colonial kind of ethos that we're living in. So I had this image. One day I felt like I was going to do something with this image, and I just kept it. And the time came. It was 1997, I think. I had moved back to London. I moved back to London after 4 years living in Amsterdam. I just felt it was time to go back. I had exhausted my time in Amsterdam. I had a really good time. Amsterdam is an amazing place to live because it's cheaper, you can easily get a studio. At the time, not so much now, but at the time you could easily get an artist grant from the government if you're an EU citizen. So I benefited from all that. Even though the immigration fees were horrible to me, I still managed to benefit from all that. So I made this piece, and I had this image. I thought, what am I going to do with this image to make it kind of palatable to look at? So you can look at it and not shy away from it, because it's a horrific, the kind of, the story behind it is a horrific one. So I decided I wanted to make it into a pattern. As you may have noticed, I haven't said so far, a lot of my work is really decorative. And for me, this piece was one of the first times where the decoration of the imagery and the content, the horrific content, kind of came together really well for me. So I made this it's like a wheel or it's a flower. And what happened when I was making it was, if you see the darker images, the darker figures are just rows and rows of figures all cut out. So the darker ones I cut out, and because I work really carefully, this is the way I am, as I cut these out, I could see on my table the negative figures that were left on my table. So they were white figures. So I decided I was going to paste them on the wall as well. It was really difficult because you're practically you're just sticking the in-between spaces onto the wall. So it was really hard, but I managed to do it. And it looks, and in the middle is like a ship's wheel, the wheel, the navigation wheel of a ship, of the slave ship, you know. And when I made something like this, it's on the wall. This was in my studio. So eventually, I had to get rid of it if I was going to do anything else. If I was going to make any other work, I had to get rid of it. So after the photos were taken, I had to wet it, sponge it down, peel it off, so that I could carry on using the wall. This next piece is slightly different. I did a residency. This one and the next one are slightly different. I did a residency in a listed building, a beautiful museum in London called Leighton House Museum. And it was the home of a former director of the Royal Academy. He was a classical painter. And he was very interested in Orientalism, as a lot of people were in the Victorian time. And I was interested in the fact that all these European people would go to China and what was then places like Mesopotamia, and they would bring back, they would rob the graves and bring back all the things that you see in the British Museum that have been robbed from all over the world, all over the British Empire. I was fascinated by that, and then they lived in these comfortable homes with, there's a room in this house which is covered from head to toe in turquoise and gold tiles stolen from graves in Turkey in the late 19th century. So I worked with all the patterns that I found in the house, of the tiles, of the curtains, of the furniture, and I just kind of made this fake version of the house, partly because I wasn't allowed to paste anything on the walls. They wouldn't let me, because it's, you know, preservation of the building. So I had to think differently, like, how am I going to make this work? I made work by pasting on the wall, but I'm not allowed to, what am I going to do? So I worked it this way instead, and on the next slide you'll see also another kind of listed building, reserved building. I wasn't allowed to work on the walls. So what I did was there's a great big circular glass window in the ceiling, and I just made a little room, hanging with paper hanging down from the little room. And on the next one, you can see that people would go inside the little room, and they would look out of the cutouts that I made. So they were in a little kind of sanctuary in the gallery space. They would look out at the little windows. Next one. This next one is unusual for me because it's in colour. Once I discovered the brown paper, it became kind of symbolic in a way that it was brown, and I didn't have to do anything to it in relation to maybe wanting to talk about brown skin or blackness or brownness. But I did make a series of works all based on the kaleidoscope, which was another toy that as a child, when I first moved to England, I discovered kaleidoscope and I really loved it. So when I was making these, I just went and bought a cheap one, and I pulled it apart, and I realised how easy they were to make. And I would make my own, but mine was big. They were like this size. They were big and they were heavy, so they had to stand on a camera tripod. So that guy there, he's looking inside the kaleidoscope, and he's turning it, and what he's looking at inside is on the walls. So there were two kaleidoscopes, one for each circular image. And the images are basically the images that I had been working with, you know, the hangman, the ringer Rosie, the girls, just general figures, the slave ship, pattern on the one over there. I think the next image just shows you, what it looked like inside the kaleidoscope. On the next one, I was asked to exhibit in St. Louis at a group show with 11 other African-born artists. I don't know if any of you know Godfrey Dolcor, but Godfrey was in the exhibition, and me, and I mentioned this morning Ogini Donald Odita, he was in the exhibition also. And basically I wanted to make the kaleidoscope piece again, but the curator said to me, there are quite a few painters and photographers in this exhibition, so we don't really have that much wall space. How do you feel about working on the windows? And I thought, I don't know, how am I going to paste paper on the windows? But again, the space dictated that I be creative about how I made my work. So instead of making the paper circular patterns, I got the patterns printed onto sticky plastic. So in a way I've gone back to, remember from the beginning when I was working with the sticky plastic, I did that and I stuck the plastic onto the windows. And it was interesting because what happened was people from outside, because it was translucent, people from outside could just look through the work into the gallery space. They didn't even have to come in. So it was like a new, for me, it was a new dimension to my practice, and it had moved it on a little bit. So I think I mentioned that I was in Ghana in 2005. So in 2005 I got an award from the Arts Council in the UK to do research and development. I applied and I wanted to research and develop new work. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, what work I wanted to make, but I knew that I needed to travel to the sites of the transatlantic slave trade. So that's why I came to Ghana, and I travelled all around Ghana, and I went to Elmina, Cape Coast, various castles, and then I went to, that's on the bottom, and on the top right, I went to South Carolina, Georgia, and Richmond, and I visited loads of former plantations, which, a little bit like the castles, they're kind of like museums. They're not World Heritage sites. They reminded me of stately homes that you get in the UK, and they have these amazing gardens, and then somewhere there's a path. Nearly always there's a path. You go down this path, and that's where you end up. You were watching 12 Years a Slave just now, so you go down this path, and there'll be a slave graveyard, or what was left of the cabins. Those are the things that I wanted to see. And the top left is